Hello and welcome to Sideline Story, your destination for sports news, analysis, and discussions. I'm Yang Guang. This week, we shift our gear to focus on the Formula One races. What did McLaren do right to rule the standings? Can Max Verstappen and other competitors challenge McLaren after the summer break? For this chat, I'm joined here with my fantastic co-hosts Brandon Yates and Fuyu. Welcome back, Fuyu. It's been some time.
Yeah, no, it's been a few months, and thank you so much. It's good to be back with the team.
Yeah, good to have you back. All right, McLaren has extended track brilliance from last season to dominate Formula One in 2025. Their duel, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, are just the points away in a two-horse race in the driver's standings. Red Bull's Max Verstappen is third, but far behind, with his hopes of a fifth successive title fast receding. And McLaren is also the runaway leader in the constructors' standings. They have achieved so far 6 1-2 finishes, just brilliant. So, Fuyu, how do you view McLaren's dominance this season going into the summer break?
Yeah, in Formula One, I feel like these comebacks or these sudden rises in a team's performance or climbing up the rankings happen very suddenly. Usually, there's no sign of a sudden improvement, and that's also the case with McLaren. Actually, you can say they showed some signs from 2023, and they really completed that comeback last season when they won the Constructors' Championship. Upgrades, we know they happen behind the scenes and we can only see the results. So I think it must be something that they're doing right to the cars, because since 2022 or 23, they've had the same driver combination. It's been Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, and these two drivers, they're about the same age. They are both extremely talented and they come from similar backgrounds. These two drivers, they're also free to compete for the Drivers' Championship. So I think that open but healthy competition also helped the team get ahead of all the other cars.
Brandon, behind McLaren's success, what do you think lead to their dominance on the Formula One track this season? Right drivers or right cars?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think we've seen it in the past with the success of, Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton and, most recently Red Bull and Max Verstappen in particular. You definitely have to have a combination of the two. I mean, but to a certain extent, it does seem to be like the difference is between, these great challenges for the championship, whether it be for the drivers or constructors championship. It does seem to be like the difference over the years has actually been the car, because when you hear a lot of Formula One drivers talk about different seasons and what led to their success and, the difference between drivers and et cetera, there really doesn't seem to be that much of a difference between the skills of the drivers. I think everyone that's competing in Formula One seems to be at a relatively similar level in terms of their ability to, drive a car really fast and get around a track really quickly. So I think that when you pair a Formula One driver with a car that has the ability to be much faster than the competition, that always helps. And I don't know if that's necessarily the only case this season, because when we look at Red Bull's dominance recently, I mean, yes, of course, Max Verstappen is a fantastic driver, but all of the talk around Red Bull's dominance was seemingly around the car. Whereas this season, I think with, McLaren's quiet ascension, it's been done quite smartly, but it's also been done really in the shadows. I mean, it hasn't been a sudden jump. They've seemed to have improved just gradually and consistently season after season. And I think this season we're finally seeing the end product of all of the work that's gone into McLaren recently. Yes, of course, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri are, two really fantastic young drivers. And for you mentioned, there's some healthy competition between the two of them. Although I think when it gets to the latter stages of the season and they're competing for the Drivers' Championship, it'll be interesting to see if that rivalry, remains friendly.
Right, I agree. McLaren's superiority on the track this season stems from the powerful combination of their car performance and driver talent. I mean, well, I still believe Max Verstappen is the best driver on the grid now. Piastri and Norris, they are not only excellent individually, actually, they also showed exceptional teamwork on the track. At Austrian Grand Prix, after the race, Norris revealed that during the critical race stages, the two drivers would achieve coordination through subtle hand gestures while driving. This is not easy to do because they were driving very fast. But the question from my side is whether this cooperation will endure when the drivers' championship intensifies.
Yeah.
They are just points away between the two in the driver standings, and whether McLaren would allow open competition between the two drivers, this remains to be seen. But ultimately, I still believe the McLaren car is the primary driver for their success this season. They showcased outstanding performance on high-temperature tracks with long corners especially. This might come from a secret weapon from McLaren. Their technical director revealed recently that McLaren has embedded a dynamic adjustment system within their car capable of censoring the track temperatures and car pressure in real time, allowing them to make adjustments, adjusting their suspension system of the car in real time accordingly. I mean, this
He might be giving too much away.
I mean, this is almost
But Yang Guang,
cheating.
Yang Guang, you make an excellent point there. I think that with the enhancement of technology and the subtle differences that we're seeing between the teams, maybe McLaren did give a little bit too much away there in some of those comments, and maybe they're looking a little bit too confident too soon. But I think going forward, when we see the differences between cars, I think the implementation of innovation and tech is going to be more and more important as the seasons progress, because like I've said, the difference between the cars isn't that major, so to find just a tenth of a second to get yourself ahead of competitors really is going to take some innovation and technology that we've possibly never seen before. And it seems like McLaren is stepping on that. But on the other hand, the competitiveness between the drivers and the teamwork is also going to be incredibly important. I completely agree with you there, Yang Guang. And I think, it kind of reminds me of Harry Potter, and the Tri-Wizard tournament, where things were all kind of amicable in the beginning of the tournament. And then as soon as it got to the latter stages, all of a sudden they were stabbing each other in the back and climbing over each other and doing absolutely everything they could to get through that maze, to claim that final, Tri-Wizard Cup. So it'll be interesting to see if things remain friendly between Piastri and Norris, because we've seen in the past that sometimes partnerships can go really
Sour.
badly. And I mean, we've even seen that
Yeah.
at Red Bull in the past.
That will very likely happen later in the season.
Yeah, things might end up very likely with what
Ugly.
happened to Leclerc and Sainz
Oh.
with Ferrari. That might be the most interesting part for the latter half of the season. But as I mentioned, the system McLaren has installed within their car, it really has given the constructor a huge lead. I mean, that makes them able to censor the differences on the track of their car in advance, faster than their competitors. I mean, this subtle difference can make almost a 1 or 2 second advantage when tenth of a second matters on the track. So this is a
1
huge
second
lead.
is huge in Formula One.
Yes. And also, former Red Bull team principal Christian Horner also said he was shocked to see that McLaren can still keep pace with high fuel load, because we all know more fuel means more weight, which is supposed to slow the car, but it seems like it's not affecting McLaren at all. And they also showed great tire management. Their tires barely showed degradation throughout the race this season. So things are clicking absolutely right for McLaren at the moment. So for you, if we look at how good McLaren is right now, do you think other competitors, especially defending champion Max Verstappen, still have chances to catch them up for the remainder of the season?
Well, first of all, speaking of how good their cars are, it reminds me of this, you can say it's a joke in China, where these big teams seem to take turns to create the cars from Mars. That's what Chinese racing fans call them. In the 2000 early 2000s, it was Ferrari and then Mercedes with Lewis Hamilton, and then Red Bull. Now it seems that McLaren has found the right formula to make the Martian cars. And to go back to your question about whether other drivers will be able to challenge them. You mentioned Max Verstappen, and I agree with what you said earlier. He's still the best driver on the grid in terms of his achievement and his experience. Also, as he's grown older, he's also changed from... You can notice the change in his tempers, and he's now a much calmer and mature driver, and also he knows exactly what he's after, and sometimes he's willing to give up certain things in exchange for results for the bigger picture. For Red Bull, I know there's been rumors about Max Verstappen potentially going to Mercedes, and these rumors fly around all the time. One day we hear that he's been talking with Mercedes, and then Toto Wolff denies it, and then they're talking again. But regardless of whether Verstappen will be able to catch up to McLaren and retain his world championship, his title, I'd like to see him switch to another team, because if Red Bull and Verstappen are able to wipe out McLaren's lead that they built early in the season, it means that Red Bull is still good enough to challenge the leaders, and they're still able to come back from reverse conditions, and that'll mean that Verstappen's outgrown this team. There's probably not that much more he can achieve with Red Bull. So if both Mercedes and Red Bull are chasing the cars from Mars, might as well change the environment and see what he can bring to the competition. And if not, if they lose both the drivers and constructors championship, also for Verstappen, he might as well also change an environment and see what sparks they can create at Mercedes. And there are talks about him potentially switching with George Russell. I think that'll be very interesting, because also these two drivers are similar in age. They've also been driving for big teams. They've had multiple Grand Prix victories. And if McLaren still keeps being the cars from Mars, the competition from behind the grid will also be very interesting.
Yeah, that would be an interesting switch. But still, look at this season. Under such difficult circumstance, Verstappen still is ranked third in the driver's standings. He's the sole competitor against the McLaren duo. Look at his teammates, either Liam Lawson or Yuki Tsunoda. They struggle at mid-table. And even sometimes they can't get points from races. Even though Red Bull designed this car especially for Verstappen, but they designed this car for one driver only for a reason, because Verstappen is the best driver at the moment. I just can't imagine if Verstappen now sits in the McLaren, what would that be? Maybe Verstappen himself also make such assumptions. I mean, for Red Bull, letting go of technical director Adrian Newey and team principal Christian Horner has taken a serious toll on their competitiveness. So I don't know, it's time for Verstappen to stay where he is now, seeing his hopes of fifth title just fading away, or making a move. I mean, you guys have mentioned there have been reports about Mercedes linking up with Verstappen for a future possible move. So, Brandon, if you were in Verstappen's shoes right now, would you leave Red Bull at the end of the season?
It's tricky, I think you have to look at it from a couple of perspectives. So if I'm Max Verstappen, and I feel and believe that I'm the greatest driver in Formula One at the moment, which I think he does believe in, and I do think that is ultimately true, especially when you look at the Drivers' Championship, like Fu, you mentioned, the fact that things aren't going particularly well at Red Bull, and there's turmoil, and the Mars cars, as Fu you put it, from McLaren are doing incredible things, but he still sits third, and he's not that far behind the two McLaren drivers, even though there is, a lot of uncertainty at Red Bull. So I think that's, even though I mentioned there isn't, that much of a difference between the majority of the F1 drivers, that conversation seems to exclude Max Verstappen because if you just look at the statistics and you look at, the way the standings are looking at the moment, it does indicate that there is something that separates Max Verstappen from the rest of the pack, regardless of what car he's in. So if I'm sitting there thinking that I'm the greatest driver and Red Bull doesn't facilitate my needs anymore or provide me with the tools that I need to perform at my best, then I think you need to move as soon as possible. But with that being said, you need to be certain that the move is going to enhance your capabilities and enhance your chances of extending your, overall drivers' championship record. Because we've also seen, one of the greatest drivers of all time, Lewis Hamilton, make some moves that just haven't worked out for him. Things didn't pan out as he would have liked at the end of his Mercedes career, but things have definitely not gotten well, have not started well for him at Ferrari. So I think Max Verstappen will be, I would be cautiously assessing my options. I would definitely be having talks with everybody at Red Bull and see what their plans are for the future and how they plan to deal with Christian Horner leaving and how they plan to deal with competing with, all of the innovations that are happening at McLaren and what can be done to compete with that and what can be done to come up with our own innovations to make us even better and to get the best out of myself, i.e. Max Verstappen, to be the best that I can be. But that being said, if a team is offering more of a personalized package to allow me to perform at my best and cater the car to my needs, and there might be other incentives, maybe financial, although I don't think someone like Max Verstappen is driven by financial excuse the pun, driven by financial incentives. I think he is driven by greatness, and I think that he does want to become the greatest Formula One driver of all time, which he really can do because, like Fuyu mentioned, the maturity and growth that he's shown in such a short space of time truly has been remarkable. I don't think we've ever seen anything like it, at least not for the last decade or so.
Yeah, whatever decision he makes, it could potentially cause some seismic consequences within Formula One, because if he leaves or if he switches teams, it could trigger a chain reaction. And honestly, I'm not too sure about how long Max Verstappen can stay motivated within Formula One, especially with him now being a father and achieved all the greatest achievements in this sport. So I wouldn't be surprised if one day he decides to retire or switch to other racing.
No way. He's never gonna. I think that he wants that overall championship record. I can see it in his eyes. I'm telling you now, that boy has no plans to retire. If he does, I will eat my words and I will be the most surprised journalist of all time. But I have this feeling that, just like Hamilton, I think Verstappen wants to go absolutely all the way and literally drive till he can't drive no more, until he becomes the undisputed Formula One driver with the most drivers' championship victories.
Okay, before the debate goes on, here's a quick review of the biggest sports headlines in China and around the world for the past week. England retained their UEFA Women's European Championship crown in dramatic fashion, defeating Spain 3-1 on penalties after a tense 1-1 draw in extra time. Chloe Kelly struck the decisive spot kick, sealing the shootout and England's back-to-back Euro triumph.
I actually missed 3 penalties in training yesterday. But yeah, I think it's the belief in this squad, whole 23 players, and the people that you don't see behind the scenes, the staff members, to get us through this tournament.
Spain took the lead in the first half, and Alicia Russo headed in the equaliser for the Lionesses shortly before the hour mark. The draw for next year's FIFA World Cup will take place in Las Vegas on December 5th. 48 teams will be divided into 12 groups of 4 for the tournament, jointly hosted by the United States, Canada and Mexico. Bayern Munich has signed Colombian winger Luis Diaz from Liverpool on a 4-year contract. British media reported Bayern paid around €75 million for the 28-year-old Colombia international. He scored 41 goals and registered 23 assists across 4 seasons at Liverpool. Today, Pogacar claimed his fourth Tour de France title, cementing his status as the most dominant rider of his generation.
I find myself in the front, even though I really didn't have the energy to motivate myself to race today. But in the end, I was really happy they neutralized the times of the GC, and then it was more relaxed to race, and you just had to have good legs to be in front.
The 26-year-old Slovenian also secured the polka dot jersey for the mountains classification. Later, Pogacar announced he will skip the Vuelta a España in order to rest. China asserted its dominance at Badminton China Open, claiming 4 gold and 4 silver medals in the commanding display just weeks before the World Championships. In an all-Chinese men's singles final, Shi Yuqi rallied from a set down to defeat surprise finalist Wang Zhengxin in a spirited 3-set battle.
I feel really moved and happy to win gold. Facing this challenge from a young player, it was not easy for me in the first game. I fell back in the second and third games. My fans encouraged me a lot, and I gave them my racket and jersey to commemorate this victory.
In the women's final, Wang Zhiyi delivered a clinical 21-8, 21-13 win over compatriot Han Yue to successfully defend her title. China has announced a near 500-member delegation, including 321 athletes, for the 2025 Chengdu World Games, its largest team in the event's history. This year also marks the first time para-athletes are included in China's delegation. The 12th edition of the World Games, the top international multi-sport event outside the Olympics, will take place in Chengdu from August 7th to 17th. Welcome back. Now, Formula One teams are going to have a 4-week break before the final 10 races on the Formula One calendar. It's a valuable time for the constructors to upgrade their cars and make adjustments. I mean, McLaren fully used the summer break last year to elevate their cars to the top level. So, Brandon, do you think other constructors like Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, they can make similar adjustments like what McLaren did last year to keep pace with McLaren this season after the summer break?
Look, I think it's possible for them to make upgrades. And I think, going back to the Max Verstappen conversation, I think that's going to be something that he's going to be looking at very closely, just, examining what's being done to bring Red Bull and, Max Verstappen back to the top. But whether that will have any impact on the overall results, in terms of the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship this season, I highly doubt it. We've seen McLaren's rise hasn't been overnight. They've slowly been kind of climbing the ranks and getting a little bit better season after season. So from my perspective, the changes that have been made at McLaren have not been the result of just miraculous work done in an off season to all of a sudden, be providing incredible results in the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship this season. I think it's been work that's been happening over many years. So, and I think we're just seeing the culmination of that this season. I think it's just, what they say, an overnight success is normally done, through years of preparation. And I think that's what we're seeing from McLaren. It does seem like overnight success, but I can guarantee you it's not. Look, I think particularly Red Bull, I think they can improve in the offseason and give Max Verstappen at least the best chance of competing for the Drivers' Championship and getting as close as possible to Norris and Piastri. But whether whether Red Bull or any of the other, teams can get to the level that McLaren are at right now this season, I highly doubt it. I think they'll look at what McLaren has done and kind of take that into the off-season and at the end of the season and kind of, analyze what's been done and figure out what they can do to match McLaren and potentially get the better of them, maybe in other areas of innovation that maybe McLaren have not touched on yet. But whether the likes of Red Bull or any other teams can match McLaren in terms of efficiency and innovation this season, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But that being said, I do think that with Max Verstappen and a push from Red Bull and some serious streamlining of the work being done by Red Bull and Max Verstappen as a team, if they focus on that partnership entirely and don't really worry about the Constructors' Championship, I think it is possible for Verstappen to make a push at the end of the season to potentially go on and lift the Drivers' Championship. I think there is still a little bit left in the tank, another pun, and maybe Norris and Piastri start panicking because they don't have a lot of experience at this end of the the driver's log. If they start panicking, I think Verstappen could smell blood and potentially take advantage of some of their nervousness, which we have seen Verstappen do in the past.
Some of the other teams may not do enough. Their upgrades may not be enough to catch up with McLaren later in the season. Something could also go wrong at McLaren.
Yeah, I would say the only X factor that could derail McLaren's title run would be the intra-squad competition between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. But now, 2025 season of the Formula One has seen 6 rookies making an appearance since the beginning of the year. The likes of Kimi Antonelli, the new Kimi, Jack Doohan, Bortoleto. They had made some shining moments across different Grand Prix. So, Fuyu, from your perspective, which rookie do you think delivered the best performance so far in Formula One this season?
This is an easy one. Everyone's been raving about Kimi Antonelli, and I agree that so far he's the best performing of the class of 2025. For these rookies this season, most of them have scored points so far, and for the standouts like Antonelli, they've already made it onto the podium, which I already think is a remarkable achievement. It's what we wanted for Zhou Guanyu a few years back. So for a young driver, especially for these teenagers at the age of 17, 18, to achieve that result is a good start, a fantastic start for them. And for Antonelli, he finished 3rd in Canada and then became the youngest race leader in Japan, and also set the record and became the youngest fastest lap setter also in Japan. So it tells you about the talent he has. And although he's achieved all that in a Mercedes, he was given a fast car, so it made all these results not that hard, but still for an 18-year-old to do that, and while also having to juggle his time in between his schoolwork. I think it's incredible. It reminds me of a young Max Verstappen when he became the youngest Grand Prix winner at the age of 18.
Right. I didn't even get my driver's license when I was 17, 18, but these guys are driving the fastest cars in the world right now. Let's see which rookies will make a splash in the latter half of the Formula One season and how title race will be unpacked near the end of the year. With that, we end this episode of Sideline Story. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to Sideline Story and leave your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information, you can also check our website at radio.cgtn.com. Until next time, stay on the sidelines with us.